In today's episode, I speak to Change Veteran Simon Phillips about how to make change happen by valuing interpersonal skills. I discuss the need to provide a compelling reason for an individual to align themselves with the change you want to see. This is a wide-ranging conversation on change for the individual and the organisation. How can change leaders do a better job? Listen up to the rest of the conversation. Before we begin our conversation, here is a quick shout out to the pathologically curious. Check out the Maverick Paradox magazine. It's a digital magazine written by Mavericks for business owners and professionals. You can find the magazine at themaverickparadox.com. The magazine's aim is to provoke maverick leadership everywhere. Welcome to the Maverick Paradox podcast, where we explore what it is to be a maverick and discover effective modes of leadership. I am Judith Germain, and my mission is to propel the maverick mindset into a world where character and integrity will ultimately have a higher premium than personality and bureaucracy. So thank you for joining me on this journey. If you would like to continue with me, then please subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or one of the other popular podcast platforms. And today, our guest is Simon Phillips. Hi, Simon.
Hi, Jude. How you doing?
I'm doing really good. What about you?
Fabulous. If you lose me at any point, it's because I think I'm in the middle of a monsoon. but apart from that, everything's grand.
No, that's quite interesting. Okay, before we start, tell us about you.
Oh, all about me. Well, I am a person who's fascinated by how people respond to the change that's going on around them. And so I've made it almost like my life's mission to help people deal with change. And in the last year or so, as you can probably imagine, the demand for that type of support has really ballooned because everybody is having to deal with change right now. And so that's been my background. So commercially or professionally, if you like, I started out with Anderson Consulting, now known as Accenture, in their change management division when a lot of the thinking around change was just getting started. In fact, in my time, it went from being the thing you did at the end of building all new systems and changing a load of processes, we better tell people, to being something that we did up front. Wouldn't it be a good idea to see, what people actually need and want? So that was where I started, and then started up my own business, mostly focused on two aspects. So it was the individuals, helping individuals deal with change and, be as productive as they could be throughout their lives. And then on the sort of commercial side, working with organizations and teams and execs trying to steer and make big change happen in their organizations. So those are the sorts of bits and pieces that I've been doing throughout my career. And outside of that, I am a very proud Welshman and have two fast growing up boys and a wonderful wife, and live down on the south coast of England.
That sounds idyllic, lush greenery and peaceful.
It's definitely lush and green at the moment with the volume of rain we're having.
Cool. So I guess you're a change veteran and you must know all that there is to know about change.
Oh, absolutely. There's nothing I don't know about change. Oh, crikey. Do you know what? Every day is a school day in this profession. You bump into new perspectives, new challenges, and, I think the sheer volume of change that's going on for people right now is new. There's been, incremental change, and there's been fast change, if you like, but the sheer number of things that are changing for people right now is new. So we're just trying to deal with that and see how much the things that we know, if you like, can support in this environment. But it is a case of trial and error on some aspects.
Hmm. Interesting. It's interesting what you say about change and how the pandemic has caused a lot of change. Do you think people are responding to it differently because it's a pandemic, or do you think what you're seeing in your business is just normal change? I mean, is it normal or accelerated now?
I think in certain sectors, it's massively accelerated. So I do some work in the public sector where, by and large, business as usual is prioritized. And by that, I mean there are government targets. There's things that we would like to do with our social services, if you like, our health and care services. And there's set budgets for those and there's targets. And so those industries are typically, they thrive in terms, sorry, let me just backtrack a bit there. What they do best is delivering against, a 5-year plan or something like that, where it's all fairly steady business as you go. What's happened in the last year is all of that's been thrown up in the air. People are having to work in different ways. The health and care sector in particular has been incredibly pressured. And so the shackles have come off and they've been basically given the resources they need to do things. And as a result, the pace of change has massively accelerated. So that's what's going on in their business. But the interesting aspect is all the people trying to deliver that, of course, are seeing massive change in their own lives as well. So if you think about our lives being split up between social, work and home, social's disappeared because of lockdowns, and work and home have become merged for some people in an incredibly stressful way. If they've got school-age children to look after, as well as not just look after, but school. So there's some addition, and this is what I meant by this is it feels like a unique time because there are multiple levels and layers of change going on, which make, everything interesting.
Yeah. And I guess there's a sense of everybody's going through some sort of change. So maybe that's easier because obviously in organizations, it's often a department maybe, or do you know what I mean? So maybe that makes a difference. I know what would be interesting to talk about with you actually is the value of interpersonal skills to make change happen. Because I know from the past, doing leadership training and working in HR, I see that a lot of organizations don't see interpersonal skills as something that's important. And I see that changing. So can we talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure why I went up 4 octaves then. But I think as you say, it's grossly underestimated the value of interpersonal skills in terms of every single process that goes on in an organization. So actually, I was making a list the other day of things that you want to do as a leader, for example. So I've been running. So one of the things that I do, which you very well know, Jude, is I'm the founder of the Changemaker Group. And we've been running strategic change boards for leaders of charities to try and sort of create some mutual support and an infrastructure whereby they can think about all the changes that are going on with their peers. And we were having this conversation about, so what is it that leaders get involved in? And I wrote out this list of 12 things. So we've got relationship building, problem solving, collaboration, difficult conversations, negotiation, listening, leadership, just as a topic on its own, decision-making, conflict resolution, influencing and persuasion, inspiring and building trust. And I thought, do you know what? Every single one of those is underpinned by your capability when it comes to interpersonal skills, because they are skills. They're things everyone can learn. And it's disguised often as being, well, it's all about communication, isn't it? And it's your communication skills. But on one level, it really is. your ability to interact with others and stimulate and maintain and work towards better discussions, better conversations, and ultimately better decisions is all to do with your interpersonal skills. So if you imagine somebody trying to do all of those things I mentioned there, but they had no interpersonal skills, they probably wouldn't get very far, because there's nothing in business that you really, really do all on your own. Everything is about the combination of two people or more. And so, if you've got no interpersonal skills, find somebody else with no interpersonal skills, and maybe you can make some progress together, because there wouldn't be any expectation of anything other than poor interpersonal skills. But for the majority of people, they want to know that that there's a real relationship here. It's not just transactional, and that there's value and authenticity in every conversation. So I think in that sense, the conclusion we came to with that group I was talking about was that, really investing in interpersonal skills was probably the thing that they had done that was of most value to them in getting to their role, getting to the levels in their career that they had.
That's really interesting. I really love that. I think what's interesting for me is that Maverick Leaders will invest time and money if needed to build up interpersonal skills because they see it as necessary. But people who aren't Maverick Leaders tend to expect the organisation to do that for them. But I don't see organisations invested in that. What do you see?
Well, I think there is a reasonable level of investment in it, but they might not call it interpersonal skills. So they might just say, presentation skills, or they might say, how to run a great meeting, or they might say, go on a negotiation skills course. And so I guess if you were the delegate in any of those courses, you will be picking up interpersonal skills. But I mean, in some respects, the best school you can go to build your interpersonal skills is actually just the world of work itself. You on a daily basis, most job roles require you to interact with other people. And so I guess the maverick person you were describing might just have a curious mindset around how are they doing when it comes to the development of these skills in the workplace. So they might be the sort of person who is consistently demanding of their boss, the next one-to-one and the next performance conversation, because they are really keen to get feedback and learn, and not just wait for the next course to come round, if you like. So I think that there are opportunities there.
The reason I giggled is because I remember almost every manager I ever had said to me, when they do the annual or 6-monthly performance reviews, they're like, I've put aside an hour and a half for you, Jude, because I know you like to ask me deep questions. Like almost every manager I've ever had would be like, because I'll be taking notes and going, well, what do you mean by this thing?
And I had a similar comment back from, so I've been out in the independent world, if you like, for about 20 years now. And every few years I send out a couple of questions to people that know me well, just to get some feedback. And somebody in my network came back one time saying, crikey, don't you know this stuff by now?
Like nothing changes. Don't need to work with you, Symes.
Exactly. And the point is, if you can become complacent, you can just assume I'm really good at all this stuff. But for so many reasons, it's an invaluable process to just seek more feedback, because all of us can improve. And even if you get to a certain level in your career and the tweaks are smaller, doesn't mean to say they're not really valuable and can make a big difference. And in our line of work, where we're trying to support others, and help others, those tiny tweaks could make almost like a life-changing difference for someone. If we've tuned in and really thought about, how we're positioning our conversations and how we're thinking about the overall interactions, when you're in some of those coaching conversations with execs making decisions maybe just for their personal lives as well as their work lives, that it can make a difference if you're literally just some tiny tweaks in the way that you're interacting with others. I'll get the words out in a moment.
So here's a question for you then. So if change starts with the individual, how does an organisation make sure that change happens? So I guess what I'm trying to say is organisations are tempted to look at structures and strategic plans and all this sort of stuff, but forget that the individual is doing more than going through the Kubler-Ross change curve.
Yeah.
So how do you make sure, or what tips can you give to make sure that the individual really is bought into the change and develops through it?
Yeah, and those that are familiar with change management will know about the concepts of, you need to engage people, and people need to feel an ownership for the change that's going to happen before they'll actually get on board with it. So that element won't be a surprise to people. What is always surprising, though, when you're working with a team or an organization that's not hasn't necessarily had to do much in the space of change. Maybe they've just had growth year after year, which is the case for a lot of organizations over the last decade. And now they're suddenly confronted with a load of change. And so they don't have that real experience. And that's fine, really, because not everybody has needed to focus on it. But where they go wrong, typically, is, as you say, when they're thinking about the change, they think, right, well, that's going to change that process there. We're going to put this new bit of technology in place. Right, okay. So we better make sure everybody's trained to use that new technology. So it's all technical and sort of thing-based. And what tends to happen is a large number of those type of projects fail to achieve their original objectives because they get derailed by people. And so I've throughout my career, I've always focused on people in the organization throughout the change journey. And so that starts with, right up front, identifying all the people that are going to be either impacted or involved in the change that we're anticipating. So that, that very detailed stakeholder analysis is effectively the first step that I would recommend when working with a client, because that's the bit that they forget about. And about halfway through the program, they go, oh, we should have spoken to Jude. No wonder she's really upset about all of this, because nobody actually spent any time talking to Jude about the fact that this is something that can be really good down the line, but might have a bit of pain up front. Because had we done that, had we involved Jude in those conversations, she would have been much more comfortable with everything that's going on. So that key bit up front is literally just the start of the process that I've created, that just helps people leading change to understand what's the impact on people and how can we physically, like literally proactively engage them in the process of planning this change. Because if you do that, you have a lot more real buy-in and ownership, as opposed to trying to convince people all the time. So that's where I see organizations going wrong, is they focus on the communication campaign and the broadcasts and the all staff meetings. And, what's the key message we need to get out to the staff now so that they can all get on board with this change. If you're feeling like you're trying to get people on board, you've missed a trick. And that trick is to get them to consider the implications of the change up front and come up with their own mini plans for what are we going to do with this and how are we going to make it a reality, because then that's real ownership.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's really useful. I think what's interesting that I see as well is that people don't think about why someone would want to be a part of the change. What's the compelling reason for that person to, add to the change and not, sabotage it? It's kind of people almost say, yeah, it's too difficult, so you won't. So it might be maybe the change is redundancy. So they go, well, no one's going to be happy about that, so we'll just tell them what we're doing and how we're doing, and that's it. No one's actually sitting down with that employee or groups of employees and saying, here's the compelling reason why we need to do this for you, not for the company. Obviously, that has to be in there, but for you, this is why it's good for you to make that change. And that's one of the reasons. Maybe that's that interpersonal skills bit that you're saying and not answering that question.
Yeah, because interpersonal skills, if you've developed them, it means that you're not afraid of conversations.
Yeah, true.
And so you are willing to have the more difficult conversations, shall we say, and you're a bit braver because you recognize that on one level, there will be a percentage of the working population that will be absolutely ecstatic at the prospect of of redundancy, and so this might mean I can get on with those plans that I've been putting off for ages. Or there will be a percentage of a company like that, and there'll be people at the other end that will be really fearful because they love this job and they don't want to do anything else. But there's always a process around these things, and the sooner you can engage people in it, the more that they will have a real opportunity to sort things out for themselves. Because that's, I think, is a disservice to avoid those conversations with your staff, because you leave them sometimes with no real time frame to think about it and to make the decisions, because you're worried that they're going to be crestfallen and actually obstructive during the process. But as you say, if you can get them to consider it on a personal level, what could this mean? And, what are the full range of options that are available to me? Then they're more likely to, first of all, give it some, serious consideration for themselves. But secondly, support each other. Because instead, what you tend to get is a bit of a siege mentality with people sort of, in inverted commas, looking out for each other just because nobody knows anything and everybody's uncertain.
And it's them against you then, isn't it? You, the company. Yeah. I mean, that reminds me of an organisation I worked with a few years ago where that one part of the organisation was exiting out of an industry, and the staff were being tupied over except for HR and senior management. And, I had this HR team knowing that they had no jobs because the other company didn't want them. And for part of me, in terms of the pace and explain to them, was like, this is going to happen. It's like, we've lost the contract, so it's like, it's not going to, and you can't rebid for the contract for 10 years. So effectively that business doesn't, this part of business doesn't exist anymore. I said, but there's a couple of things. I said, you will learn things that you will never have the opportunity to learn probably anywhere else.
Yep.
You have the ability to help your friends who are move over well. You can help that transition. And also, if you tell me what you want for your next job in this transition, I will train you to be able to do it.
Exactly. And that type of management and leadership is what we need to see more of. And, there will be a lot of people, tuning into your podcast that are sitting on decisions right now, wondering. And I know that sometimes we don't have all the information, so we can't necessarily just go and announce to everybody what's going to happen, because the decision hasn't actually been made yet. But I do think it's much wiser to at least discuss with your staff the sorts of things, the range of options being considered, or the range of possibilities that may or may not transpire as a result of industry change or government decisions, or things outside of our control potentially. But still, it makes sense to treat people as adults and think about how much you can share with them, because I think we underestimate the workforce quite often, especially in hierarchical organizations where, you've maybe got what organizationally looks like a junior team, but every single person in that team will have a mortgage, will have a family commitments to deal with. And I mentioned those things because all of those take a lot of strategic thought. And yet we assume that their teams maybe at the sort of more junior end of the organization may not be able to think this through for themselves.
Yeah, because I mean, if they were idiots, you wouldn't have hired them in the first place. So they're obviously intelligent. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but we just underestimate them all the time.
That's a really good point. I like that. That's a good point. So I was thinking when you was talking that change is just a reflection on your leadership.
Oh, it's an interesting one. Tell me more. What are you thinking?
Well, I'm just thinking that if you lead in a way, so if you're an effective Maverick leader, you care about the individuals, you work for the greater good, you treat them adult to adult. When you're going through change in terms of interpersonal skills, you do all of those things. You pace them. You're not frightened to say, I really just don't know, Symes, what's going to happen next. Here are the things that could happen, but right now I really don't know. But because of your leadership, people will trust that response. They know you're not hiding anything. Or if you can't say, you might say, I really can't say. But because they trust you, they know that you have them, even if it meant that they end up leaving, it will be in a fair and safe way, and you care about them as individuals. So that's a reflection of your leadership. But if you don't do these things, then you were never a good leader to begin with. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and there is so much overlap between what I would call broad leadership skills and change leadership skills. That list I mentioned earlier, you're doing all of that if you're leading change. There's nothing really. I'm a big fan of John Maxwell and in his 21. His list of 21 leadership skills. And I've reflected many times on how many of those we have to deploy as leaders of change. So there is a massive overlap, because literally change is the business of leadership. It's what leaders are paid to do in organizations. Now, it's not always advertised as change. Sometimes it's advertised as redeployment or re-engineering, or it might be merging organizations and things like that. But all of those are significant changes that go on. What hasn't happened, though, in the last 10 years, as I was mentioning earlier, is that it's literally been a cycle of growth. So the only change leaders have had to get on board with, and people, if you imagine people who were 10 years ago, maybe they were middle managers in organizations, and now they're leaders. So they were leaders of teams, but now they're leaders of divisions and organizations. The only change they've had to oversee is how to grow something. So something is growing, and it's the organization and their teams are stretching at the seams. How do we deal with that? But right now, as I was mentioning earlier, there's so many other types of change going on that this is a bit like your HR team, where you said to them, this is a great opportunity for you to grow your skills and put your skills to use. This is a tremendous time to prove your leadership, because people are going to struggle with the volume of change that's going on. Well, people are struggling with the volume of change that's going on. So, as leaders, we've got to be out there supporting people, keeping the energy high, making sure people feel valued and cared for, and that they are capable of getting through these changes.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, not to say, I mean, obviously this whole pandemic is a horrible, horrible thing. But there are maverick leaders out there who are squealing in delight with the amount of change that is happening, because it's just like, yippee, there's now no routine, and it's almost like everybody's living the maverick way, in the sense that we don't know what the change is, but it's coming and we've got to get on with it. And so maverick leaders, it's quite exciting. And I think whenever I've done maverick leadership training, I've always considered the individual who is change ready as a default change ready, like mavericks are. That's a leadership skill. So always, incorporated somewhere in the training or the mentoring or whatever, this ability to be change ready. And yeah. I think, I don't know, you're the change veteran. Is that something that we really ought to be going out there just teaching as a standard thing to everybody?
Definitely. And not just in organizations. We should be doing this in communities and in families. And there's a big, we're running a bit of a campaign inside the Changemaker group at the moment, all around resilience and how individuals can enhance their resilience and the resilience of their teams and all that sort of good stuff. But that really the opportunity here is to support everybody in developing a change mindset, or a change maker mindset, if you like, which is a willingness to accept what is what's going on, and but married with a personal resilience that says, I may not always be 100%, but generally you can rely on me. Together we can get through this. So there's that. It's a bit of personal resilience which you're willing to share, because it's a bit like love in a way. You can you double the love when you share it with somebody. But if
you old romantic.
I have my moments. But similarly, you can boost your own resilience by supporting someone else.
Yeah.
There is something, I hear coaches talking about, but you've got to fill up your own cup after you've given so much to your coachees or whatever. But I do feel I feel a little bit differently about resilience, because if you are feeling resilient, almost the best thing you can do is get on the phone and help somebody else who may be struggling right now, because it's not necessarily going to, deflate your own resilience. It's actually going to make you feel even better, because yes, great, I've helped that person. Right, what's next? But those are sort of mindsets of a change leader. Really, they've worked on their resilience, and they've worked on their ability to just accept things, not in a passive way, but in a way that says, we can always find a way around things and we can make things work. There's a real positive mindset in there that I think is really useful to train leaders on, so that they can approach uncertain things and ambiguous times and still realize that there's something we can do to be proactive in this environment.
Spoken like a great maverick leader there, Symes. Working for the greater good.
Yeah, definitely.
Is that why you envisioned the change maker community, the giving back part?
Yeah, absolutely. And it didn't even feel like giving back. It was more a case of, I heard somebody say once that the ambition for Coca-Cola was to have a can of Coca-Cola within arm's reach for everybody around the world. And I thought, do you know what? Actually, even better would be to have somebody within arm's reach who had the mindset of a change maker. And so that's sort of like underpinned the mission of developing change makers everywhere. So, the things so our group, if you like, the Change Maker group is a profit for purpose organization. So any profits we get, we try to put back into the change makers community, which is us going out there and trying to help and support people who are effectively helping and supporting others. So we see our role as being facilitative and supportive of everybody else who's out there making a massive difference. So that's really what it's all about, as opposed to, I don't see it as a sense of obligation. No. I see it as something that is very positively driven. It's something that we, I choose to do. And actually, I was talking to somebody else yesterday who started his own sort of global mission, if you like, and we were talking. Oh gosh, where was I going with that comment? About that sense of mission. No, it's gone out of my head. but it was something to do with, not necessarily feeling obligated, but actually, I know what it was. The question was, what would you do if you won the lottery and didn't need to work? And I think it was in that context that I was saying, I would still do what I'm doing now, but hopefully some aspects would be accelerated because we'd have more resources available to us. So that was sort of where I come at from that one with.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, we've known each other now for a very long time, many years. And, the first time I met you all those years ago, you were the change man. And you kind of you have this kind of hybrid, haven't you, where you've got the change maker group, which is really for organisations, and then you've got your own change man stuff, which is for individuals. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, it comes back to what I was saying earlier. So I've always loved helping individuals. And so, and increasingly that's becoming easier and easier as technology improves. Mm-hmm. So back in 2003, I was writing my first book, which was called Time Management 24/7. And the 24/7 aspect of that was, do you know what? Actually, we can do things differently now. We could even be doing a project with people that were the other side of the world, which seems laughable now when we look back. But it was the thing I was getting excited about at that time, because for me, that just meant that there's more individuals I could help. Now, there's always that, acres of diamonds story about there's lots and lots of diamonds just on your doorstep. You don't have to go around the world for it. But for me, it was just a dual passion, if you like. So I have this passion of supporting individuals and helping them acquire the mindset and the skills of a change maker. And whilst we do that through the group, it's always in the context of supporting organizations to get through change in one piece, if you like. So the group is very much focused, because we have more capacity between us as a group, and amazing skill sets around the people in the group, that enables us to do bigger projects. But for me, as the change man, if you like, it's all about what can I do personally just to help one more individual acquire this mindset, so that they can cope, and not just cope, but support others around them as well.
Thank you for that, because I know that you look quite closely on that interpersonal skills for the individual, and I think it makes a nice sort of, you've got the individual themselves, so if they don't get the support from the organisation, they can do it themselves. I mean, that's how you've priced it, isn't it? So an individual can do it. And then if that individual wanted to, they could, go to their organisation, and organisationally they can access similar support through the Changemaker group.
Absolutely. And, we do, last week I was delivering a program for a big health organisation, which is it's leadership development, but within the context of change. But there are other organizations that where I know they don't have the resources to do that, or they don't actually see it as mission critical right now. And so there will be quite a lot of the people that I support are probably coming from two areas. Either they don't have that sort of support in-house, or it doesn't quite match doesn't quite match their own personal aspirations. So they might be in a role currently that is quite different to the one that they have an ambition to be involved in. And so they're not going to be able to get the skills that they want in that workplace, if you like. So I'm there, if you like, to try and support people with that ongoing, continuous professional development, really. So it is about that relationship between the sheer number of leadership skills that are useful to people in their everyday lives. And that's where I'm trying to support people, because, if you get better at listening and you get better at decision making and influencing people, that's going to pay huge dividends in your personal life as well. So yes, I try to support people who maybe have aspirations beyond the current organization they're in, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I've got a couple more questions that came up in my head, and I'm thinking, change for innovation, how is that different from the change you've been speaking about? Because we've talked a lot about the negative side of change, in the sense that, people are reducing size or there's a transition into a different way. I'm just thinking, if you're an organisation and you're right now and you're thinking, right, this is amazing, we can innovate, we can do this and change what we're doing, how do they make that change happen? Or is it exactly the same as any change?
So the process of change, I would say, should be exactly the same. Mm-hmm. So I created a model quite a few years ago called the Delta model, which basically, as I said earlier, is all about the people dimensions of change. Mm-hmm. And if you want to innovate, let's say you're innovating in a part of your business, there will be people impacted by that, as well as a bunch of people involved in that. And just because it's innovation doesn't mean to say that everybody's going to immediately see all the benefits. In fact, quite a few people will just see hard work and limited improvement, maybe in their specific space of the business. And they will, in that sense, feel a little bit resistant to it. So your job as the change leader is still to effectively personalize this, get those people to think about the change for themselves, as you said earlier about personalizing things, because just because it's innovative doesn't mean everybody's going to get excited about it in the same way that you are as the innovator. So it's still a people process. It's still something where you need to involve and engage people personally, and then you need to do your best to get out of the way and let them get on with it and transform the business in their own way, almost. So in a way, you should be less concerned with how people change the operation compared to what the outcomes are. I see that's your role as the leader of change, is just to ensure that the outcomes achieve everything that everybody wants from the change, if you like. But how they go about it is almost irrelevant. Because people will go about it in their own way with a lot more energy if they can see the benefits for themselves. So whether it's a merging organization or a downsizing organization, actually, that just reminded me, Jude, of a funny story about how in the 90s, when every organization was downsizing, it became such a anathema, if you like, that people wanted to call it right sizing. But it was amazing how right sizing was always down.
It's true.
But irrespective of the change, and that means including innovation and growth and all the rest of it, there's still a people process sitting there that's going to require some thinking through.
You know what? That just reminded me of the very first redundancy in an organisation that I saw. So that's a long time ago, and I was still a teenager. And what had happened was that the organisation had invested into a market that then blew up in the whole, all the redundancies happening. So they were getting rid of people, but nobody knew what happened. Was that in that division, people came to work and there were literally a dustbin bag and tissues on their desk. And they were told, a list of names, either go out the left door or go out the right door. One door was you're staying and the other door you're going. But this organisation was a massive global organisation. And obviously, everybody started faxing and it impacted the entire organisation because everybody started writing, even though, it was just this, and it was a relatively small number of people involved, maybe 30, but thousands of people started doubting whether they'd have a job or whether they should leave or sort of thinking, oh, this is not the organisation I thought you were, and everyone's looking and saying, is there any dustbin bags on my desk? Let me just look underneath the chair just to make sure. And I don't remember thinking, gosh, if I ever became a manager, that is not how I would do it.
No. And I know that there are circumstances in which that type of change can be very difficult to communicate and engage people because, you've got maybe commercial sensitivities around, you don't want your market, your competitors knowing what's going on inside your business and stuff like that. But if you create a culture inside the organization that is supportive, when those sorts of decisions have to be made, people will still feel like, that was still a great organization to work for, even if they had to then make me redundant in short order.
Yeah.
So I suspect, I don't know, but I'm guessing the organization you're talking about didn't necessarily have the most supportive culture in the first place.
Well, that was quite ironic because probably not in that division, but in the division I was, they were almost like parents.
Right.
So it was kind of a massive, and it was my first proper job as well. It was kind of a shock. It was like, but this is like, mummy and daddy's kicking people out the house. It's what it felt like. That's what it felt like.
It's only a little bit of tough love. Don't worry about it.
Exactly. What did they do wrong? Which was quite ironic. So my final question then. So if an organisation is going to make change happen, what are the steps they need to do?
First of all, get on the phone to Jude because she'll help you. Oh, sorry. Is that not what you're talking about?
They can phone you as well.
I think it's about recognising the... in fact, I've just finished writing a blog on a similar topic, and I said the first thing you need to think about is what's the full impact of the change. So, and I mean full impact in everyone that's going to be affected, influenced, involved, or even you suspect might be involved at some stage. Map that out, really understand it, which is a little bit like, in marketing terms, we're always told do some incredibly detailed investigation into your target market, because otherwise your marketing won't land. It's the same with change in that sense. Be incredibly forensic almost in terms of identifying everybody that might be involved, because otherwise your change has the potential to be derailed. So I think it is all about really understanding the impact and the people that are going to be involved in some way, shape or form in the process, because then you can start to think about, so what are the challenges? What are the real issues that we're dealing with here? And you can scope the project effectively. You can't really scope it if you just think, if you're a really enthusiastic innovator and think, oh, this is wonderful, everybody's going to love this and welcome it with open arms. We don't need to talk to people about it because it'll just be great. All of a sudden you've grossly underestimated your project and very unlikely to deliver. So I think it is that, be really thoughtful about what's the impact, what's the full impact of this change.
Cool. Thanks for that, Simon. So how can people get in touch with you?
Well, two ways. We've mentioned the fact that I'm sort of busy in two areas. The changemakergroup.com is where we promote all the services that we're doing and trying to help organizations we're really focused on helping leaders in changing organizations. That's really what we're all about. So as I say, the changemakergroup.com. And then personally, I think the best thing to do is just come and join me on my YouTube channel, which is Simon Phillips TCM, because I'm, constantly putting out stuff all around this change concept from an individual's perspective. And, sometimes I talk about it in terms of if you're in an organization, how can you make things happen? But generally, I'm trying to get the message out as far as possible to individuals for all of their personal reasons why they might be tackling change. So that's Simon Phillips TCM. So, and if you do come there, just say hi, and then it'd be great to get in touch that way.
That sounds fantastic. I think I'm going to have a browse through your YouTubes. And whilst I'm browsing, if I find something else I want to talk to you about, will you come back?
Oh, go on then. I'd love to, Judith. I think what your podcast is amazing, and I think you're doing a great job here. So it'd be fun to come back and contribute if I can.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you once again for tuning into the Maverick Paradox podcast. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my conversation with Simon as much as I enjoyed having it. At the Maverick Paradox, we improve your impact and influence by enabling you to effectively strategize, innovate, and execute. Find out more by contacting me at judith@maverickparadox.com. Thank you.
If you are pathologically curious and would love to find out more about the Maverick Paradox, then please subscribe to this podcast on one of the popular podcast platforms. Alternatively, you could explore our resources on Mavericks at maverickparadox.com or read the Maverick Paradox magazine. We publish frequently each week. If you subscribe, you will get our monthly newsletter. And let's not forget my book, The Maverick Paradox, The Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders. For those that love a good discussion, you could apply to join our exclusive Facebook group. Finally, if you would like to work with us or are interested in the Maverick at work, check out maverickparadox.co.uk.